Welcome to another episode of Untold Chapters. Today, I'm joined by Jessica Rhodes, author of The Adventures of Archie Boo. Inspired by her rescue dog Archie and her grandmother's poetry, Jessica's book brings heartwarming, adventurous stories to young readers, blending fun with valuable life lessons. Good morning, Jessica. How are you today?
Hi, morning. I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. My name is Jessica Rhodes. I am a children's entertainer slash author, now newly author, which is very exciting. I've been working in the industry for over 10 years, which is unbelievable to think how quick time flies. And I have published the book The Adventures of Archie Boo, which is a 5-in-1 storybook for children ages between 3 and 7. And it's a picture fiction book that's based off of my dog, Archie.
So, Archie Boo's adventures are inspired by your rescue dog, Archie, and also your grandmother's poetry. Could you share how these influences came together to shape the book?
Yes, so I grew up with my grandmother reciting endless amounts of poems. It was something that we always looked forward to when we were being looked after by her, as my parents were working hard, running the house, etc. There are so many poems that I actually remember to this day, which is just unbelievable. The fact that you can walk through life reciting something that you grew up with a connection with. There was one story in particular that my grandmother shared about two pussycats trying to get some food whilst they're stuck in a storm. And there was another one about having bath time. And it was some of the most comforting and loving ways that I can always remember being brought up with my grandmother. When I was in lockdown, I actually went over to hers to help her kind of file things and clean the house. And I came across all of her poems that she's written throughout her entire life. And they've been dated back to the 1970s, which is just unbelievable. One, the fact that she actually has them still, but
Yeah.
two, because she recited so many. And there were so many different ones based off of people that she's met, her friends, her family, places that she's been. And she just drew inspiration from anything and everything, which just speaks volumes about her as a person, but also about how she perceived the world. And it was so easy to kind of follow that along in a poem form because you envision, whatever you're trying to describe through rhythm and rhyme. I was heavily influenced by rhyming books and song as a child. I was absolutely fascinated by the musical industry, but also through movies and literature. And it kind of helped shape my understanding of the world around us. Archie was obviously the main inspiration for the book. And during lockdown, I think everyone can kind of resonate with the fact that it was almost the only sense of normality you had, spending time with your animal and going outside and into the world. And it reminded you of, how life was before lockdown.
Mhm.
And it's very easy to pull and connect those similarities between how I felt reading the poems that my grandmother wrote and how Archie connected me to the world again. So it was really easy for me to kind of make the connection of the two. And I started writing these poems about Archie and the things that he does that haven't really changed for him in his perception of the world. And that was the only way I could kind of make sense of it at the time. And it just kind of started growing and growing until I felt almost obliged to try and get this out in the world for everyone else to have the same connection that I do. And I spoke to my grandmother about her poems at the time, and she said that I would have loved to have all of mine published, but back then there wasn't really any way of doing so. And I honestly felt so heartbroken that there was this amazing talent that she had and this incredible passion that she had, and she couldn't share it with anyone. So I asked her permission, and I actually took like a line or two from some of the poems I really enjoyed, and it triggered this story about Archie, and it just flowed into my own writing and my own creativity and my own emotions and feelings, and that's kind of how all of it came about. And it heavily influenced the journey of what is the Adventures of Archie Boo.
That is such a beautiful backstory. Thank you so much for sharing that. It just shows you how much goes into the books from an author's perspective that wouldn't necessarily be visible to the readers, but just hearing how much it means to you is so lovely. And like I said, thank you for sharing that. That was a gorgeous story.
Thank you so much. It's just so lovely to be able to kind of help her live that part of her life that she didn't have the opportunity to do, and help her feel involved as well. And knowing that it was so difficult for people back then to be able to do what we've done now, it just kind of really sinks in how privileged we are to be able to have this access and share these stories and these experiences with everyone else.
Yeah, of course, and we can access this so easily in nowadays. It's amazing, and that you can share your stories with people all around the world, sort of in the click of a finger, as it seems. It's just so amazing, and I'm sure your grandma is so proud of you, for achieving this and kind of taking so much inspiration from her.
Yeah, she's a very inspirational woman, and everyone that comes crosses paths with her always says the same thing. She's so uplifting, she's so trusting, she's just incredibly inspirational and motivational in so many ways. And I think when you're brought up with someone like that, you do tend to adopt it. And that's the one thing that I kind of channeled into to having Archie, and looking after him and helping him bring him up, because you then start to see it in his personality and his confidence as it grows. So it's just wonderful to kind of see those connections and put it into writing, really.
As the book explores love, anxiety, and social cues, friendship, it really shows that. So, how did you balance these deeper themes with the playful and colourful nature of children's stories?
Oh goodness, I think this was probably the biggest challenge when I was writing,
Mm.
because when you have so much emotional connection to the story, you tend to write how you feel, and as it is, and as you perceive it at the time. And there were so many drafts where it kind of was as it is, and then I realized I've got to try and make it actually entertaining for children.
Yeah.
And that's to start kind of making it a little bit more playful and a little bit more adventurous and fun and colourful, not only in the illustrations but in the story itself. But it was really easy to do in a way, because once you've written down one version of it and you start kind of looking into the way you want to change it up, you can see where there's missing links, and you can kind of tweak the way you're writing to kind of make it more balanced. And the thing is with Archie is that he's so balanced as a character. He's so playful and so reserved and so self-assured, and yet so reliant on you at the same time,
Yeah.
that though they all balance themselves out, and it's really easy to pick those up. There were times where Archie would hide under the dining room table because we're leaving to go out, and he's scared and worried and upset. And then when you come back in from your time outside, he then starts flinging your slippers around the room and eating all of his treats you've left out for him, and coming up and wanting fusses and rolling around on the floor. It's so balanced in the way you perceive that, and in the way that he shared his emotions and showed you how he felt. So it's really easy to kind of showcase that and balance the story out that way. And I think by exploring the fact that things can be scary due to the unknown, it's also easy to show that when you're experiencing it, and how you see your achievements and overcome those worries, it can be an exciting and fun moment for you to cherish. And that was the one thing that I heavily relied on when writing these books, that yes, okay, there are these things that you would come across as a child or as an adult, and trying to make sense of the world and how you feel. but just overcoming it and allowing yourself to seek adventure and find comfort in that alone is the most uplifting and comforting way to write and to see the situation that you're in. And I think that's why I wanted to do the mini stories in one book, because then however the children are feeling at the time and want to resonate or understand through the adventures of Archie, they can pick the story that suits them. They don't have to read the book and go through all of the emotions. They can just pick the one that they want to kind of experience with him. And it's really odd because that's not how I wanted to write the books at all. And I think a lot of authors probably say this, like you think it's going to be one thing and it ends up being another. But as you start kind of, going through the stories and picking at it and making these small tweaks, you start to then read between the lines. And it's been absolutely wonderful seeing how children can really pick these things up and these themes and really share how they feel using the books.
I think as well, because you're highlighting so many different themes in the book, like you said, you're exploring, I believe in the first story, he's finding a new home and he's really anxious about it. And then he has a fun day at the beach. He meets a dog that has a disability. So I think it's teaching children so many amazing different ways to regulate their emotions, to relate to the story. It's just a very useful tool, whether that be in a house with a parent and child, whether it be at school, or even just a child reading it themselves. I think it's such an amazing tool, especially like you said, because it's 5 different stories. They can pick and choose what they read, but it still feels like something fresh every time. And I think you've done a really amazing job with that.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is, Archie really helped me understand my emotions. I struggled with anxiety growing up, and he, as it displays in the book, he had separation anxiety, and there's all these scary new things he's got to try. And yes, there's exciting things, but there's always that worry. And it was really easy for me to kind of understand how I'm feeling by understand how he's feeling. And I think
Hmm.
the power of animals when you're growing up as a child is so incredibly resonating for any child in any situation, because they can't talk to you and you rely on, body language. And I think that's one of the things that my illustrator, bless his heart, he was absolutely incredible.
Hmm.
And I actually sent him videos of Archie playing and photos of him on his adventures so that he could really capture that body language that dogs use. And that way they can children can pick that up, understand it, and then apply it to the real world as well, whether that's with friends, family, themselves, animals, whatever it is. And I think it's so wonderful for them to be able to learn with animals for that reason. I actually had a review from a child. I bawled my eyes out for
Oh.
a solid 10 minutes. It was absolutely amazing. I never imagined at all when I wrote this book that I would receive a review like it. But there was a grandmother who owned a dog the same breed as Archie. So she bought the book to read to her grandchild. And she messaged me and she said, my grandchild said once he read the book that he hopes when he goes to heaven, he can play with Archie and go on an adventure with him and tell him how much he's loved. And this was an absolutely unbelievable thing for me to try and understand, the fact that a child can be so comfortable with the notion of heaven and feel like that's the only way they're going to be able to see Archie because of the distance and
Hmm.
everything else. But also to just acknowledge that he's actually real, all of these feelings are real, and he completely understands the adventures he's been on and the things he's overcome. And I genuinely wanted to write a book for children to go, yes, I'm going to take my dog that I've just got to the beach and I'm going to let him like run around in the sand and show him all the fish. And instead, you've got children that are genuinely excited to meet him at any
Yeah.
point in their lifetime, which is just unbelievable, really. And I never imagined that I would get such feedback like that.
That is such an amazing review. And it leads really well on to my next question, which speaks about how the design of the book is so accessible for the readers, whether that be for children with learning disabilities or just children in general. So, would you like to share more about how that thought process came around with your illustrator and how you made the book so accessible and impactful?
It wasn't something I originally planned on doing. I think
Hmm.
I never anticipated for this book to get as far as it has. And obviously I was writing it with just Archie, existing by my side at the time and kind of writing as I see it. And as I kind of acknowledged the possibility of it being a physical book, I then thought to myself, what are the gaps in the market that really prevent children from being able to enjoy a storybook? And at the time, my partner's little sister was diagnosed with dyslexia,
Hmm.
and she relied on a coloured reading card to be able to read at ease. And I think that's something a lot of children are facing at the moment, and it does kind of hinder their reading experience and their confidence as well. So one of the first things I said to my illustrator was, this experience that I've witnessed firsthand. And I asked him to, when actually looking into the text that we put on top of the page, to make sure that one, the font is fairly simple
Hmm.
and that it depict which letters are which, but also that we put a white, almost like cloud behind the text so that it doesn't interfere with the imagery, and the imagery then doesn't interfere with their ability to read and the colors that they may need to use to read in terms of colored cards. So that was like the first prominent thing that I felt really strongly about, because I wanted to make sure that every child has access to this.
Hmm.
It's something that's very, resonates with me very strongly. The second thing then was, well, how far can I push this? I've started it now, I've got to keep going. And I realized that, it is a poem. And I myself am actually going through the process of having an ADHD assessment at the moment. And I have friends that are also neurodivergent, and things like song, poem, anything that you can adapt to make your own so that it's more comfortable for you to read and find your own flow through the story is a lot easier to then adapt to a child's additional needs. So things like turning a poem into a song for neurodivergent children that only really react to tone and rhythm can easily be done with the Adventures of Archie Boo. But in addition to that, you've then got the color themes, because every story has a different color theme. So some children may react to a color theme more strongly than others. And in addition to that, then you've got the senses that Archie heavily follows through with each story. It's always talking about what he smells, what he sees, what he hears, and it kind of takes you through the story that way. And again, for children that are neurodivergent or children with learning disabilities, it's very easy for them to heavily rely on their senses because they can be heightened or they can be hindered. So it's a way for them to make sense of the surroundings that are around them in any situation. At the time, I wanted to write it that way because that's how children make sense of the world anyway, because everything is so exciting and and it's so like amazingly colorful and vibrant and busy. But for children that are needing additional requirements when it comes to things like focusing on a book, it's the only way that they can make sense of a story anyway. So it's the beauty of writing it about a dog, is that all of their senses are heightened, and that's how they operate and work throughout the world. And similarly, children, with that fit into these certain demographics, are also the same. So it kind of all flowed and worked beautifully in the end, but it wasn't how I started it off. It just so happened that I started looking into the accessibility needs for dyslexia, and then it just tangented off from there. And I realized it's such a perfect fit for any child that struggles to find a book that they can enjoy.
The thought process that went into all of this just, it sounds incredible. As you said, I know you didn't initially plan for it to be an accessible book, but the more that you looked into it, it really shows that your passion and even your background as a children's entertainer, you have so much interest in making sure these things are accessible for children and that they're going to enjoy it, that it really shows that this was at the forefront of your mind as soon as it came to you. It was so important to you, and I just think that's lovely.
Oh, thank you so much. It is unbelievable how you can start off with one thing and it opens a whole new platform that you can just dive into, and it opens up a whole new perspective on things, really. And I think that's the one thing I've learned with this whole journey with writing the book and creating the book is that it starts off one way, it ends another, in the best ways possible.
So, speaking about your background as a children's entertainer, this must bring such a special touch to your writing. How has your experience in your career changed how you create characters, stories, and even interact with the children that are reading your book?
It's such a fascinating question. And when I read this beforehand, I was like, I could go on about this all day. So I needed to really think about what was going to be most important. And I think the one thing for me that really always stood out was, and it's always been this way, even when entertaining children. So for a bit of background, I'm a face and body painter for
Hmm.
charity and community events, which means that I entertain children from the ages of 3 all the way up until teenage years. And it's really fascinating how they all have the same mindset when they're receiving my service. I'll have photos up of different face paint designs that they can pick from, and every color that I choose, every brush that I choose, they always think and ask me questions about what bit's that for. And they're so fixated on the simplest of details, and they're so entertained by the idea of piecing everything together to create the entire look. So they always tend to have this beautiful open-mindedness and curiosity, and they're always really particular about color. I always say, oh, what's your favorite color? And that all of the girls go, I want rainbow. And I'm like, okay, I'll do every color. And the guys are like, I don't want glitter, I want black, blue and red. And it's, you do get boys that actually want a unicorn and girls that actually want a football, and there is no problem in that whatsoever. But the majority tends to ask for the same
Yeah.
thing. They see one person have one look, it tends to be the first one I do, and then every child wants the exact same thing for the whole day. I only paint unicorns, or for the whole day I
Yeah.
only paint rainbows. And it's because they see the detail and they see how it's done and they're fascinated by it. So for me, when I was approaching the book, that was always something that was heavily influencing the way I moved the story forward. And the transitions in the journey are never detailed, because that doesn't matter. It's about the dog's perspective, it's about Archie's perspective, why he does things the way he does them, or the thought process behind things. For example, there's one where he's rolling around on dad's clean socks in the kitchen because he doesn't like the sound of the washing machine, and mum puts him outside because he's being naughty. And so that didn't really need that much information, because the actual story is about his adventure in the garden and the creatures and animals that he sees. But it's all of the details around his motivations that make the children connect with the story. So that was something that I always focused on when I was writing the book, because I know from experience that's what the children are interested in. And then I think the other thing is, like I said before, the color themes. I worked with Joe so much, my illustrator so much, bless him. I think I called him like every week. I was like, oh, this could be an option. And I think for the second story in the book, it's, I do actually write that it's a warm winter's day. So we made sure that the color themes are all kind of, autumny colors and, auburn browns and oranges. And the same with the seaside story. It's all, pastels and golden sand, because it helps them connect with the story no matter how much it transitions or moves forward, because the setting is so prominent. And I think the other thing that I think, because I connect so well with children and I know how to kind of speak with them, when I walk Archie, they would always go, oh, look, a dog. And I go, do you want to give him a pet? Do you want to give him a little pat on the head? And Archie was always one of those dogs that would just go, oh, hello, hello. And then once he said hello, he'll walk off and go on his own adventure and do his own thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't interested in the children whatsoever. But the children were always fascinated by him. And I always used to tell them, his name, how old we think he is, because he's a rescue. And then tell him, how we got him and what his favorite things are. Like his favorite food is cheese. And it was all those little details that they absolutely loved. Their faces lit up. And I think that's the one thing I always took with me with every approach to the next story, was as long as you've got the details and the behind the scenes thoughts of and motivations of Archie, they will always follow it along. So it had a lot of influence, and I think it's a blessing that I was able to really have the experience I've had and use that to the book's advantage. But it's proven that it's worked. Children love it.
Definitely. I think because children have such vivid imaginations, they really benefit from having every single detail you can possibly give them. Although some people might think it would overwhelm a child, I think it really helps them picture it in their mind, and they just can run away with that thought and take it and really see it for what it is, which an adult might not be able to kind of process with our different thinking styles. I think, like you said, you've given the children as much information as you can. You've said it's a warm winter's day, so you're going to make the pictures a warm winter's day. It just shows, again, how much thought went into the book and the accessibility of it, and just the background into how you're going to spark the imagination of these children.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing how far their imaginations can go. And I think that's why the illustrations were so important to me, because being neurodivergent, you do heavily rely on imagery, and you're very, very visual in the way that you think, in the way that you imagine, or anything, whether it's fictional or non-fictional. And that was the biggest thing for me. Every one that I wrote, every story that I'd written, I would sit there, and as I'm writing each stage, I'm already envisioning how it's going to look. So Joe was an absolute trooper, and he worked so incredibly hard, but he was also extremely fascinated by this project, and he actually pulled a lot of inspiration from his own children's books. And he sent me, examples, and he said, I know that my kids really love this part of the book. How can we incorporate this into it? And I think one of them was a unicorn book, and they had like little bubbles with the different stages of the action that they're writing about at the time. And so in the I've actually got it in front of me, in the seaside story, we've got the different Polaroids with the different things that are seaside, and that was heavily inspired by that. And it just goes to show that if the visuals are just as important as the writing. So I'm extremely grateful to have had Joe be included in this process, because without his professionalism and his ideas, I would not have nearly even been able to bring it to life as much as he has. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey, really, to see it black and white words on paper to these bright, bold, colourful, animated representations of Archie.
So that has been amazing to speak with you today, Jessica. Thank you so much for sharing all these lovely stories. It's such an inspirational book, and we're so pleased to have it in our collection.
Oh, thank you ever so much for having me. I really do appreciate having yet another platform to take over the adventures of Archie.
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute journey, and I'm just so grateful that it's now available for people to share and enjoy just as much as I do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Untold Chapters. If you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. For our Spotify listeners, be sure to follow the podcast and leave us a 5-star review. There'll be a link in the description to purchase The Adventures of Archie Boo. We'll see you next time for more Untold Chapters.